All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Grizzly's Cave. This is Grizzly Andrew. And before we get started on this next episode, I do want to go ahead and plug the next NAW wrestling event. It will be February 7th at 7 p.m. Nebo, Kentucky, at the Nebo Community Center, and the doors will open at 6 p.m. Ticket prices are the following: free for anybody ages 0 to 5, $5 for anybody up to age 12, or from ages 6 to 12, $5, and then anybody 13 and up is $8. Um, Concessions will be available. It is a family friendly promotion. I promise, folks, you will not be disappointed. I know you've heard me say that on all my other episodes when I've plugged all wrestling events, but I do know there's going to be war games at this next event. It'll be Team Gnaw versus Team Nightmares, and I imagine it is going to be a great match. So if you don't have anything going on, definitely go watch that show. But also, before I begin, if you are interested in sponsoring Grizzly's Cave, or if you would be interested in making a donation, you can email me at grizzliescave@yahoo.com for more details. If you have any stories at all about going to wrestling shows or being present for pay per views, or you want to share any wrestling experiences that you would like read on a podcast episode, you can also reach out to me at grizzliescave@yahoo.com. There is no apostrophe. And if you do want your story read and you wish to remain anonymous, just make sure that you put in your email that you would like to remain anonymous. Also, folks, I want to thank you all for your support. And if you like this episode, once it goes on YouTube, obviously it'll be in a video format. If you like the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm now on six platforms. I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and now I'm on Patreon. All right, so yesterday I concluded my series on the late Hayabusa, and I've been toying with the idea for the last few weeks of kind of starting um, not a different series, but like a little subset of episodes, kind of similar to what Wrestling Bios does. And I'd actually had started a PowerPoint to do a recording on, but I thought to myself, no, I'll just keep it simple. Just keep a simple format. Don't add any gimmicks. No pun intended. Don't add extra gimmicks or extra this and that. Let's just keep it simple and let's just talk about wrestling. So the subset series I was gonna name this is "Who All Did Vince McMahon Drop the Ball On?" And folks, I have a pretty good list, and I would say you all have a very good list as well. And I'm sure that there will be some common denominators in those lists. But the first person I thought of was the late Bray Wyatt, the Eater of Worlds, the Fiend. By far one of the best gimmicks ever in WWE, in my opinion. So I'm going to be reading you all his story from Wikipedia. I want to make sure I throw that in there. This is not my verbiage. This is Wikipedia's. Now I will stop like I did with Hayabusa. There will be points I will stop. I will put my 2 cents in, and we'll just roll from there. I mean, I'm not really expecting this to be a one episode subject. This may be multiple episodes like Hayabusa's was, because there's a lot to talk about with Bray Wyatt. All right, Wyndham Lawrence Rotunda was born on May 23rd, 1987. He was best known for his tenures in WWE from 2009 to 2021, and then he came back in 2022 until his sudden and unfortunate passing in 2023. It is still hard to fathom, folks, that he's been gone for almost 3 years now, and he was only I just turned 40 on back in December, and he's just a year and a half younger than myself. But anyways, we're gonna push forward here. He was a third generation wrestler, following in the footsteps of his grandfather, Blackjack Mulligan. For a lot of you old school fans, you'll remember Blackjack Mulligan from being a part of the tag team, the Blackjacks. He was tag team partners with Blackjack Lanza. Bray Wyatt's father was Mike Rotunda. Um, JC Flash, I'm sure you'll be hearing this. So since you're a big NWA WCW fan, you'll remember him as Captain Mike Rotunda, as well as Michael Wall Street. But me being a WWF Golden Era fan, I, I really remember Rotunda as Erwin R. Shyster, better known as IRS. And if you folks are not familiar with that gimmick, look it up on YouTube. It's pretty comical. Slick back hair. He'd wear glasses, not even fully on his face. They'd be kind of hanging on the edge of on the tip of his nose. He wore a white shirt with a white button-down shirt with a red tie. He had red suspenders on. He had black dress slacks and then his wrestling boots. Mike Rotunda was a really great wrestler, but as soon as he get on the mic and cut a promo, he would tear into the fans of whichever city that he was wrestling in, and he'd call them all tax cheats. And whoever he was in a program with, he'd always refer to them as tax cheats. And um, I would say that Bray had already had a good example set for him in regards to promo skills, but obviously he had the wrestling pedigree as well. Bray's uncles were Barry and Kendall Windham. Barry Windham, he was a horseman in WCW. He had a few different gimmicks in WWF. He had the Widowmaker, he had the Stalker. Then eventually he became um, Blackjack Wyndham whenever WWF had this thing back in the mid 90s. This was pre Attitude Era. They had a tendency of repackaging or bringing back tag teams that had success in earlier years, and he would call them the new something. So there was like the new Blackjacks, the new Rockers. Eventually, there was the new Midnight Express, etc. Bray Wyatt also had a younger brother named Taylor, and you all will know him as Bo Dallas or Uncle Howdy now. Alongside his brother, they held the FCW Florida Tag Team Championships. And if you don't know what FCW is, FCW was Florida Championship Wrestling. It was one of WWE's developmental territories. Prior to that, it was known as Deep South Wrestling. So they would have that in the South, and then they would have Ohio Valley Wrestling um, up in the little bit further north and all that. But then FCW eventually became what we now know as NXT. But anyways, I digress. Bray and Bo, they held the Florida Tag Team Championship twice. He wrestled under various ring names between 2008 and 2012. And then when he got called up to the main roster in 2010 and up and through 2011, he was known as a member of the Nexus. Oh, Lord. Under the ring name Husky Harris. There's been a theory that me and some old buddies of mine that were wrestling fans had, and the theory that we had was is that they just had that we think WWE had some kind of name generator, um, and that's how these names came into existence. But again, that's just a theory. Speaking of the Nexus, I will more than likely do a similar episode like this in the near future. I really thought the Nexus could have been a very dominant faction, but I'm actually going to kind of touch base on what killed that here in a little bit. After returning to WWE's developmental territory, which, as I stated a minute ago, was rebranded as NXT, Rotunda was repackaged as Bray Wyatt. He was portrayed as the villainous leader of a bayou dwelling cult called the Wyatt family. So I remember reading about the Wyatt family on ringsidenews.net. Back then it was called, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Ringside News. It was WrestlingHeadlines.com. Back then it was referred to as LordsOfPain.net. And as soon as I saw the name the Wyatt family, the first thing that popped into my head was the Heenan family, managed by the late Bobby the Brain Heenan. But then as I started watching um, some of the promos and everything, and then I watched a match that Bray Wyatt had against Kane at the 2013 SummerSlam, I was like, yeah, this isn't like the Heenan family by any means. But anyways, one thing that was interesting about Bray Wyatt's gimmick is the attire. As it said, he was the leader of a bayou dwelling cult, but he had he wore a fedora hat, he had the Hawaiian floral shirts, and he had these white pants and stuff that he would wear. He kind of reminded me of a hybrid of a couple of different wrestlers from back in the day. So, um, I know JC and a lot of the other NWA, WCW fans will remember who Dan Spivey is. Tough son of a bitch, I'll tell you. And he was, Dan Spivey, unfortunately, he was given a gimmick back in 95 called Waylon Mercy. And if you get curious on looking that gimmick up, it's spelled Waylon like Waylon Jennings, and then Mercy, you know. Um, if you look at Waylon Mercy, or if you just look up his images on the internet, you'll see a strong resemblance in attire between him and Bray Wyatt. But also, based on Bray Wyatt's size, he reminded me of Tugboat, or for other folks that remembered him as Typhoon of the Natural Disasters, or the Shockmaster in WCW. If you go back and look at those two characters, Tugboat and Waylon Mercy, you'll see a little bit of a resemblance with Bray Wyatt. When Bray Wyatt returned to the main roster with the Wyatt family, he had two members with him: Luke Harper, who we all know as the late Brody Lee, and then Eric Rowan. Bray Wyatt subsequently became a one-time WWE champion, a two-time Universal champion, and a one-time SmackDown Tag Team champion, alongside with Harper, and for a brief time with Randy Orton under the Freebird rule. He was also a one-time Raw Tag Team Champion with Matt Hardy, and that was back when they were called the Deleter of Worlds, which I really liked that tag team. But after a hiatus from August 2018 to April 2019, Wyatt returned with a new split personality gimmick, which saw him switch between the two characters of a Mr. Rogers esque children's TV host named Bray Wyatt and a grotesque monster resembling an evil clown called the Fiend. I gotta admit, folks, the Firefly Funhouse. When I first saw this, I'm like, what in the world are they doing? But then I was like, okay, I'm really liking this creative direction. I really like it. Bray Wyatt, he was released in WWE in July 2021, but he did return to the company in October of 22 with the new character that claimed to be his real life self, though he gradually reincorporated his previous personalities in addition to new ones. In what would become his only televised match during this return, he defeated LA Knight in January 2023. He took a medical hiatus in February that year due to a COVID 19 infection, and then later that year in August, he died of a heart attack at the age of 36. So that's just a brief introduction to Bray Wyatt, but now we're going to get a little bit more in depth here. So Bray Wyatt attended Hernando High School, where he won a state wrestling championship at 275 pounds in 2005, which that was the year of his graduation. He also played football as a defensive tackle and guard. He played at College of the Sequoias for 2 seasons, earning a second team All American honors as a sophomore offensive guard at the California Junior College. Sorry about that, folks. Had to open me up another Best Choice zero sugar cola. He earned a football scholarship to Troy University, where he played college football for 2 years. He left Troy 27 credit hours short of earning a bachelor's degree after deciding to become a professional wrestler. Making his debut in a dark match on the February 5th. Actually, let me backtrack. Hang on. Let me go back up here. So, actually, folks, the stuff I just read you about his athletic background, I had no idea. But it doesn't come as a shock just because of his size and just how big he was, and also how well he moved for a bigger guy. Him being a former football player, that would definitely make a lot of sense. And when he graduated, he was already a beast at 275 pounds, and this definitely would help. This would definitely help him as he was pursuing his professional wrestling career. Um, Making his debut in a dark match on the February 5th, 2009 episode of Florida Championship Wrestling, he would work under the names Alex Rotundo and Duke Rotundo. In June 2009, he began teaming with his brother Bo Rotundo, winning the FCW Florida Tag Team Championship. On June 2nd, 2010, he joined NXT. Um, and for those of you that don't know how NXT first started, basically it was a WWE show where a developmental wrestler, and he would be named the Rookie. He would be paired with a WWE wrestler, and they would label that wrestler the Pro. So, under the name Husky Harris now, Cody Rhodes was his pro. He was eliminated from the competition on August 17th. Harris reappeared in the season finale of NXT with the other eliminated rookies and joined in on the attack on the NXT winner, Kaval. And for those of you who don't know who Kaval is, he was better known in TNA, Ring of Honor, etc., as Loki, and then eventually Senshi. And if I'm not mistaken, let's see, this would have been 2010, so I believe this was the second season of NXT, if I remember correctly. While on NXT, Rotunda continued wrestling in FCW while retaining the Husky Harris ring name. In September 2010, following his elimination from NXT, he began a feud in FCW with Percy Watson when he attacked Watson while teaming with him in a tag team match, which led to Watson being pinned for the loss. When Harris and Watson faced off in a match, they were both counted out as they brawled out of the arena, which led to a no disqualification match that Husky lost. The feud ended in October with Harris defeating Watson in a lumberjack match. At the Hell in a Cell pay per view on October 4th, 2010, a disguised Harris and Michael McGillicuddy, who is better known as Curtis Axel or Joe Hennig. He is the son of the late Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. Those two interfered in a match between John Cena and Wade Barrett and helped Barrett win, which forced Cena to join the Nexus faction per the pre match stipulation. And Harris and McGillicuddy would become members of the Nexus weeks later. He would even be a part of the Nexus when CM Punk became the new leader of the stable on the January 31st, 2011 episode of Raw. Harris was written off television after Randy Orton punted him in the head. It's rather ironic that several years later they would cross paths again in a similar fashion. Following the punt by Orton on Raw, Rotunda returned to FCW and in March 2011 adopted the gimmick of the hockey mask wearing Axel Mulligan. Oh my. Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there. I'm not against the hockey mask if it's like a Jason Voorhees style mask. So I'm going to throw that out there first. I like the name Axel. I actually do like a little bit of Guns N' Roses. Um, I think it could work. It just kind of depends on a little bit more of what the gimmick or the backstory of the gimmick is. But anyways, but the character never made it to FCW TV, and Rotunda continued to play the Husky Harris character on FCW TV. In 2011, August 2011, Harris became embroiled in his brother Bo's feud with Lucky Cannon and Damian Sandow. Bo at that time was the FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion. The brothers later teamed up to defeat Cannon and Sandow. Later, Harris voiced his displeasure of Bo's relationship with Oksana. Excuse me. And folks, if you don't remember Oksana, she was on the third season of NXT when it was all women contestants. That also had Naomi, AJ Lee, Caitlyn, etc. And then let me jump back to when I mentioned Damian Sandow. That's another wrestler that Vince McMahon severely dropped the ball on. But anyways, Bo wound up suffering a legit injury, and his title was vacated, and a tournament was set up to determine the new champion, during which Harris defeated Big E Langston, or as we now know as Big E, to make it to the finals, which was a fatal four-way match against Dean Ambrose, Leo Kruger, who eventually became Adam Rose, and Damian Sandow. Uh, He lost after Richie Steamboat, the son of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, was at ringside um, to aim for Ambrose, but instead Steamboat wound up performing a super kick to Harris instead. Despite Oksana managing to get Steamboat to attack Harris again, he still won a triple threat match against Ambrose and Sandow to earn a match for the FCW Florida Heavyweight Championship against Kruger, which Harris lost when he was distracted with Steamboat's interference once again. As a result, Harris and Steamboat began feuding, with their first match ending in a no contest. Kruger later defeated the pair in a triple threat match to retain the title. However, Harris defeated Steamboat in a no holds barred match. After the pair continued to frequently attack each other, they were suspended for 30 days. Upon their return, Harris defeated Steamboat in a bull rope match to end their feud. On February 2nd, 2012, Harris and Bo Rotundo defeated Brad Maddox and Eli Cottonwood to win the vacant FCW Florida Tag Team Championship for the second time. Um, Brad Maddox, I was never a fan of. Yeah, I never was a fan of him. For any of you Brad Maddox fans, I'm sorry, but he never should have made it to the main roster. Um, but I will say this: he did date Paige or Soraya, many years ago. So I mean, he does have that claim to fame. Um, Bo and Husky successfully defended the FCW Florida Tag Team Championship against Antonio Cesaro and Alexander Rusev. Ironically, Vince wound up dropping both their first names, and they just became Cesaro and Rusev, respectively. Uh, Two other guys who Vince dropped the ball on drastically. Um, but they lost the championship to Corey Graves and Jake Carter on March 15th. In April 2012, Rotunda was repackaged as Bray Wyatt, who initially associated himself with Eli Cottonwood and FCW. When WWE rebranded FCW into NXT, Bray Wyatt debuted on the July 11th, 2012 episode of the rebooted NXT taping at Full Sail University, where he defeated Aiden English. It's kind of funny how I've mentioned a good bit of these names, and eventually they all wind up being intertwined with each other. Aiden English and Rusev joined up there for a while, and then Aiden English did the singing and started doing the Rusev Day and all that. I mentioned Oksana. She was paired up with Cesaro there for a while when Cesaro first came to the main roster in 2012. So it's really awesome reading over this stuff and then just kind of realizing and remembering how a lot of these folks wind up being intertwined with each other. Um, in July, Wyatt suffered a torn pectoral muscle and required surgery. Despite the injury, Wyatt continued to appear on NXT, and thus the faction known as the Wyatt family was born in November of that year. Luke Harper was his first quote unquote son, and Eric Rowan was his second quote unquote son. Wyatt had his first match back from injury on the February 21st, 2013 episode of NXT, where he defeated Yoshitatsu. Wyatt suffered his first loss on the March 13th episode of NXT to his brother, Bo Dallas. And before I continue, Bo Dallas, I really think I really think I think he got done dirty as well. Which, I mean, like I said, I've got a list of folks that should have been pushed better than what they were. Um, I don't, I don't care what people may think. I actually thought the Bo Leave gimmick that he had in 2014, basically like a motivational guru, inspirational speaker type gimmick, and then how he would run the victory lap around the ring when he won his matches. I like that shit. I remember telling my buddies one day, I said, you know, guys, I said it would be pretty awesome if he aligned himself with the New Day, and once they won their match, instead of them running around the ring, they march around the ring, clapping their hands and stuff to the New Day's music, and Bo Dallas does the same thing with them. Um, but then I know Bo Dallas became a member of the short-lived Social Outcasts faction, and then he was gosh dang, what was that? He teamed up with Curtis Axel. I think they were called the B Team or something like that. They were when they were affiliated with the Miz. I mean, now Bo Dallas is Uncle Howdy, and I mean, not saying he hasn't had success in his career. I just really believe he could have done bigger things just like his brother did. But anyways, on the May 2nd episode of NXT, Wyatt lost to Chris Jericho. On the May 8th episode of NXT, Harper and Rowan defeated Adrian Neville and Oliver Gray to win the NXT Tag Team Championship. And if you're wondering who Adrian Neville is, he is known in AEW as the Bastard Pack. On the July 17th episode of NXT, which was taped on June 20th, kind of sounds like some golden era stuff that WWF would do. They would air it at a later date, but it was taped like 3 or 4 weeks earlier. Anyways, Harper and Rowan lost the NXT Tag Team Championship back to Neville and Corey Graves. On the May 27th episode of Raw, WWE aired vignettes promoting the upcoming debut of the Wyatt family. The vignettes showed the Wyatt family's backwoods origins and Rowan wearing a lamb mask. And I gotta admit, folks, that was kind of creepy. Um, I don't know, something about that lamb mask just it really freaked me out. On the July 8th episode of Raw, the Wyatt family made their debut by assaulting Kane. The Wyatt family continued their attacks on wrestlers such as R-Truth, Justin Gabriel, Drew McIntyre, Heath Slater, and Jinder Mahal, and they would sending cryptic messages to Kane, asking him to quote, and I'll never forget this, follow the buzzards. Following another assault, Kane challenged Wyatt to Wyatt's first main roster match, and it was a Ring of Fire match at SummerSlam on August 18th, 2013. So, the Ring of Fire match was basically an Inferno match, similar to what Undertaker and Kane had back in the Attitude Era. The only difference was with this match, let me backtrack. The difference between the Inferno match and Ring of Fire match, the Inferno match, the only way you could win, you had to set your opponent on fire. However, we're going to fast forward 15 years later. We're now in the PG era, so obviously, with WWE being a publicly traded company, they're definitely not going to be setting people on fire. So basically, it was just a standard. It was a standard match that could be won by pinfall or submission, except it was surrounded by fire. And folks, I watched this match. Um, it I thought it told a good story. Obviously, Bray Wyatt wound up winning this match, and I mean, fuck, I mean, you win your first main roster match at one of the big four pay-per-views against somebody like Kane, and um, Kane could still go even back in 2013, folks. Now, was he the same Big Red Machine from that we all you know were scared to death of, and was the stuff of nightmares in 1997? No, but he was still a he was still a big wrestler. Could still go, could still put on matches, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I liked the match. Um, Bray Wyatt won. There was, like I said, there was interference from Harper and Rowan. Um, let's see. I think at one point they wound up taking a fire extinguisher to one of those frames that had the flames on it. Um, that backfired on him, and then I think eventually they wound up covering it with some kind of canvas or whatever to get the fire to stop. And then they came in and attacked Kane, and then eventually Bray Wyatt got the win. Um, what was really weird is right after the match, Harper and Rowan um, they attacked Kane again, and then they wound up carrying him away. Wyatt then his next big pay per view match was at the Battleground pay per view on October the 6th, and he took on Kofi Kingston. And it was actually in this match when Bray Wyatt debuted that infamous spider crawl where he would go upside down and he'd walk with his hands and feet and stuff. Like I said, um, what I mentioned about Kane back in '97 being the stuff of nightmares, Bray Wyatt doing that was the stuff of nightmares. And not only that, but those cryptic promos he would cut. I mean, good shit, you know. But one thing I really did like about Bray Wyatt is they would show a clip. He'd be, lighting up that lantern, and he'd look at the camera in whatever city they were in. He would say, the city and all that, and then he'd look at the camera and say, we're here, and then he'd blow out the lantern. The music would play and all that, and then he'd make his entrance. I thought that was some good shit. But anyways, um, Bray Wyatt would get the win on Kofi Kingston at that pay per view. At Survivor Series on November 24th, Harper and Rowan would lose a tag team match to CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. This was start there. Sorry, folks, a little tongue tied there. Um, Bray Wyatt and Daniel Bryan had been in the beginnings of a feud, and this led to a 3-on-1 handicap match at the TLC pay per view on December 15th. Um, they would wind up defeating Daniel Bryan. But, folks, I'm going to throw this out here, too. This is also the same pay per view that CM Punk took on the three members of the Shield in a 3-on-1 handicap match. Excuse me. And he wound up going over. This is also the same pay per view where CM Punk was getting heckled by everybody and their mom behind the scenes telling him, yeah, but you got to make Roman look strong, you know. So help this make sense to me, okay? It made sense for the Wyatts to beat Daniel Bryan in the handicap match. Okay, that makes sense. Please explain to me how CM Punk's supposed to go over on the Shield. Can somebody please explain that to me? That makes no fucking sense. But anyways, I digress. On the final Raw of 2013, Daniel Bryan defeated Harper and Rowan in a gauntlet match so he could face Bray Wyatt. However, they interfered for a disqualification and attacked him until Bryan gave in and joined the group. If I'm not mistaken, as they're beating him up, Bray Wyatt told Daniel Bryan, you can't defeat the machine and etc. And so Daniel Bryan wound up joining the Wyatt family. On a little side note on this, well, actually, hellfire, folks, I have fucking side notes like crazy. So, anyways, um, this was also the same year that Daniel Bryan had really come into his own, and this is also the same year where he defeated John Cena for the championship at SummerSlam, the same one that Bray Wyatt defeated Kane at. And then within less than 5 minutes, that was all taken away from him when Randy Orton cashed in and Triple H turned heel and cost Daniel Bryan the match. Uh, it's crazy because the fans were so behind Daniel Bryan. He was the ultimate underdog. And Daniel Bryan is pound for pound one of the best wrestlers ever. I'm gonna say that. There's a lot of great wrestlers, but I'm gonna say Daniel Bryan, pound for pound, would be one of the greatest. A lot of dream matches that could have happened with him and a whole slew of technical wrestlers. But anyways, Vince McMahon was not wanting to push him. He was not big on Daniel Bryan, and I really think that Vince was trying to kill Daniel Bryan or was trying to kill him off, uh, figuratively. And I guess what better way to do that than to have him join the Wyatt family? Um, and it was really weird. I think it only lasted for like a couple weeks, but Daniel Bryan, I think at that time was going by Daniel Wyatt or whatever, but he had like this blue jump. It wasn't really a jumpsuit. It was very similar to what Rowan wore. It's just except it was like a dark navy blue. Um, Anytime that the Wyatts would lose, Wyatt would punish Daniel Bryan, and eventually, a couple weeks later, this led Bryan attacking the other members of the Wyatt family on the January 13th episode of Raw, and it would signal him breaking free of the group. Basically, there was a tag team cage match with Bray and Daniel going up against the Usos, but at the time I called them the Usos. But um, yeah, Daniel Bryan broke free from the Wyatt family, and this led to their. They had a great match at the 2014 Royal Rumble. Wyatt would actually go over in that match. Um, and actually, Bray Wyatt beat him clean. If you haven't watched that match, look it up. I'm sure you could find it on YouTube. Um, you might be able to find it on Netflix now. Now that WWE has switched their programming over to there. But really good match. Um, so you got to think he's beaten Kane. He's beaten Kofi Kingston. He's beaten Daniel Bryan multiple times. Then then that's going to lead us to the Elimination Chamber pay per view of 2014. It was a 6-man tag team match between the Shield and the Wyatt family, and I remember watching that match. And before the bell even rang, after the music had faded out, you could hear the fans shouting, "This is awesome! This is awesome!" And folks, it was fucking awesome. It was nice to see something different. You're so used to seeing the same people over and over and over again. John Cena, Roman Reigns. But anyways, at that time, it was awesome to see Roman, Seth, Dean, Bray, Harper, Rowan. It was so nice to see something different. The Wyatt family would go on to defeat the Shield in that match, and you got a chance to see another little bit of Roman. Eventually kind of showing signs that he's going to be the breakout star of the Shield. But later on that night, the Wyatt family would cost John Cena, would actually interfere in the championship elimination chamber match. Um, they would um, they would actually cost John Cena to lose, or not really lose, but John would eventually get eliminated. And so now you got to think, well, hell's bells. He's beating all these guys. The Wyatts and the Shield had a hell of a match. Could we have a big push in store? Well, in that slideshow, folks, that I was working on, my next slide had a slide of Vince McMahon dropping down, and it had the words "No chance in hell" written across the slide. So they set up a match between Bray Wyatt and John Cena at WrestleMania 30, and I watched the I watched the whole pay-per-view. Um, this match did have a good build up to it, and I got to credit Bray Wyatt for his promos, his psychology. I've got to credit Bray for that. This match was only it was halfway into the program, mid card basically. What I thought was pretty cool was the group that performed Bray Wyatt's entrance theme. They actually performed it at WrestleMania. Now, with that said, and you folks will know what I'm talking about, if you're a wrestler and the group that does your music, if they are performing that song at WrestleMania, that means you're going to be doing the job. It happened to Triple H at WrestleMania 17 when Motorhead performed his song when he took on the Undertaker. It happened to Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 30. Um, it happened to Shinsuke Nakamura at WrestleMania 34 when he challenged AJ Styles for the WWE Championship. It happened to Ronda Rousey when Joan Jett performed her song at WrestleMania 35. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awesome when somebody can do a live rendition of your entrance theme, but 9 times out of 10, well, actually, I'm going to say 9.5 times out of 10, you're going to do the job. So, but there was some things that Bray did during this feud, and well, actually not the feud, but the match. During the match, he got down on his knee. He sat down on his knees and he tried to get John Cena to hit him with the chair. He was trying to get Cena to, do what other heels have done to try to get Cena to embrace the hate, turn into a monster, etc. Well, as has happened with a lot of folks that had a lot of momentum built up, they usually get fed to John Cena and then their stock goes down. And that's what happened at this WrestleMania match. Bray Wyatt did the job for John Cena. Me personally, I don't think he should have had the match with Cena. And I'm going to say this because this is also the same WrestleMania where the streak was broken by Brock Lesnar. And I'm not taking anything away from Brock Lesnar. He is a tough son of a bitch, uh, one of the baddest badasses to ever walk God's green earth. But I believe that it should have been Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 30, and Bray should have been the one to break the streak because he already had this momentum going. And you got to think, too, several months earlier, he defeated Taker's brother Kane at SummerSlam in that Ring of Fire match. That would make more sense. Him losing to John Cena did not make any sense to me. And I'm sure it didn't make any sense to a lot of fans that were in attendance and also watching the pay-per-view from the network. So, how are we able to salvage this? Oh, well, let's have them do another match. So, after the WrestleMania 30 match. Oh, and by the way, this was Wyatt's first pinfall loss on the main roster. So the feud continued after WrestleMania 30, based on the story that Wyatt was capturing Cena's fan base, um, which was exemplified by Wyatt leading a children's choir to the ring on the April 28th episode of Raw, with children later putting on sheep masks. Okay, so I didn't watch the episode, but I did watch the clip on YouTube when it came out, like like within the next day or two. So the children's choir were dressed in black, excuse me, and the song they would be singing, and Bray Wyatt would sing with them too, was "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." And Bray Wyatt could actually carry a tune. And at one point, the lights go out, and when they come back on, all the children are wearing the sheep mask. I thought it was really awesome. So, um, so they had a cage match at Extreme Rules on May 4th. Wyatt did defeat Cena in the cage match after repeated interference from the Wyatt family and a quote unquote demonic child. Okay, so I watched that match. I fucking hated it. Um, During the match, Cena got to showcase his quote unquote Super Cena strength. Well, actually, let me backtrack. I shouldn't say quote unquote. Cena was a strong motherfucker back then. Um, I've seen videos of his workouts and doing Olympic lifts and all that with Cesaro. The dude can throw some weight around, so I shouldn't say quote unquote. But he did showcase his Super Cena tendencies when he was trying to exit the door, but Harper and Rowan were blocking it and they were holding it in. Well, then Cena would slowly push the door open, yell, growl, scream, and all that. Uh, there was actually something else I forgot to mention that Wyatt would do. As he's kind of acting like he's leading the chorus and all that, for he's got the whole world in his hands. The crowd would sing along. Folks, that is how you get over. Is if you're the heel and you're getting more over with the crowd than your baby face is that you're feuding with, you know you've got money. Well, anyways, and then at one point, Wyatt would hold Cena up, and then Cena would be unconscious or whatever, and then Wyatt would have him held up. They'd be kind of dancing around the ring and all that to the all to the tune of "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands," and just some good shit right there. I mean, just good psychology. And Bray Wyatt had all the aspects it took to be a champion and to be a top main event guy. But anyways, so the demonic child that they're referring to, this was a head scratcher. Um, Cena's about to exit the cage out through the door, and then the lights go out, and then only the ring lights came on, and then you hear someone singing in a distorted voice. He's got the whole world in his hands, but it's got that demonic sound to it. And then it's a fucking kid, probably no older than 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8, if that. And, Bray Wyatt winds up hitting the Sister Abigail on Cena, knocks him out, then Bray exits the cage. No one ever saw the demonic child again. So, um, okay, so now we're tied at one apiece now. So maybe we can salvage, this fuck up that Vince McMahon caused for Bray Wyatt's career. So how do we salvage this? Oh wait, let's let Bray Wyatt and John Cena have a last man standing match at the June 1st Payback pay-per-view. I watched that match. I fucking hated that one too. Cena would get the win, shocker. I actually had a slide that had a picture of Cena holding a towel and it said "I won," LOL. But anyways, yeah, he buried Bray Wyatt under multiple equipment cases to win the match and end the feud. Okay, so one of the my previous guests, Freddie Banks. I'm sure he may be listening. He may listen to this episode. Freddie, I know you're a big Cena fan, but John Cena had a reputation for burying guys back in the day. They had all this momentum build up, and then they'd face John Cena, and then they'd lose. And then it took forever for them to build their stock back up. Some of them didn't even build it; it never did get built up. I'm going to throw a few examples out. So I mentioned the Nexus faction. It was led by Wade Barrett. Wade Barrett, great wrestler, great mouthpiece, a really good heel. He kind of reminded me of an old time, not an old timer, but a classic heel. From Golden Era and even further back. Um, they had a lot of promising young talent in that faction. Well, they were basically they were beating up Vince McMahon, The Undertaker. They were beating up other wrestlers. They were beating up referees, ring announcers. I mean, they were causing a lot of carnage, and that's good shit. Well, how do we keep this ball rolling? Oh yeah, let's have a 7-on-7 Survivor Series style elimination match at the 2010 SummerSlam pay-per-view. Um, it gets down to John Cena for Team WWE, and the last two for the Nexus was Wade Barrett, and it was it might have been Justin Gabriel or Heath Slater, but Cena gets DDT'd outside the ring, but he makes his comeback and winds up eliminating the remaining two Nexus members. Okay, folks, the other people on Team WWE that got eliminated had like Daniel Bryan, Chris Jericho, Edge, R-Truth, John Morrison. Um, even Edge there was an article, I can't remember which website it was, but it was either Edge or Jericho um, that had mentioned it, but they both had told Cena, how does that make any sense? That was a bad move to make, basically. Um, then there was Rusev. Rusev was on a massive undefeated streak, and hell, he even went into WrestleMania 31 as the U.S. champion. He faced John Cena and lost. His winning streak was gone. Lost the U.S. championship. And it took a while before he was able to build himself back up. Damian Sandow. Sandow, hell, he won I believe it was the 2012 Money in the Bank match, Money in the Bank ladder match. And hell, he was the first person to ever cash in, and he lost. And who did he lose to? John Cena, folks. Ryback. And I know a lot of people are not big Ryback fans and don't hate on me, but I did like Ryback. Was he a great worker? When he first was on the main roster, he basically just reminded me of the next coming of Goldberg. However, fast forward to end of 2014 into the rest of his career, he actually became a good worker and he could move for a big guy. And I mean, he eventually was able to build himself back up. He was eventually Intercontinental Champion, etc. But he was fed to John Cena, and it took a good couple of years before his career ever bounced back. Sorry, folks, if you haven't noticed, I'm not a big John Cena fan. I do respect what he did for the business. Like Hayabusa, he was very loyal to to WWE, but I really felt like he hurt a lot of careers. And honestly, folks, I feel the same way about the late Hulk Hogan. And not to speak ill of the dead, but you know, um, I felt like Hulk hurt some careers, and or and hindered pushes, etc. Um, that's just my opinion. Don't take it as the gospel. You can take it with a grain of salt. Um, but anyways, okay, so he now has Bray Wyatt has now went 1 for 2 against John Cena in this feud. Is there a way that we can salvage this, Vince? Well, on the June 13th episode of SmackDown, Bray Wyatt defeated Dean Ambrose to qualify for the 2014 Money in the Bank ladder match for the vacant WWE World Heavyweight Championship, excuse me, on June 29th. So, I should clarify something as well. It was at this time that the Shield had just split up. Um, this is when Seth Rollins would venture off to his architect gimmick or protege of Triple H for the Authority. Dean Ambrose would begin his lunatic fringe, very similar to the John Moxley gimmick that you see in AEW, minus all the bloodshed and the deathmatch stuff. And then Roman Reigns, he was getting groomed for his big babyface push, but he still kept he altered up his shield gear just a little bit. But anyways, so we get to this 2014 Money in the Bank ladder match. I can't remember who all was in this, but let me see who all was in this match. Give me just a second. I remember there was Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns, John Cena, I think Randy Orton and Sheamus maybe, but let me just see here. Let me scroll down here. Oh, you gotta love laptops. Okay, so it was actually had Alberto Del Rio, Bray Wyatt, Cesaro, John Cena, Kane, Randy Orton, Roman Reigns, and Sheamus. Sheamus was actually the U.S. champion at this time. So let me just double check here. 8 people, 8 people in this match. I know there's usually been 5 or 6. Actually come to think of it, at WrestleMania 25, they actually had 9 people in it. So actually, this isn't uncommon for them to have a bunch of participants. But folks, you'll never guess. Do 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 do. John Cena won, and he became the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. Now, I did mention that it was vacant. If you folks will remember, Daniel Bryan actually won the championship at WrestleMania 30 in the main event when he faced off against Randy Orton and Batista, or Blue Tista. Um, well, he had suffered an injury within about a month or so, and unfortunately, he had to vacate the championship. So, henceforth, why Super Cena won this match. In case you folks did not know, a couple of months later, when Brock Lesnar defeated John Cena and when Suplex City was born, that was actually intended for Daniel Bryan, actually. Daniel Bryan was going to get suplexed all over the place, and then Brock Lesnar would finish him off with an F5 and win the belt. But because Daniel Bryan was injured, that wound up going to John Cena instead. The following night on Raw, the Wyatt family attacked a returning Chris Jericho. This led to matches between Wyatt and Jericho at Battleground on July 20th, which Jericho won, and then at SummerSlam on August 17th, where Wyatt won a rematch despite Harper and Rowan being banned from ringside. The feud with Jericho ended on the September 8th episode of Raw when Wyatt won a steel cage match by escaping the cage. Um, this is going to be rather ironic here. So I mentioned how Ryback um, came out on the losing end of the feud with John Cena. This was back in the spring of 2013, and shortly after that, Ryback got put into a feud with Chris Jericho, which Ryback came out on top. Fast forward a year later, that happened again with Bray Wyatt, where um, Bray came out on the losing end of a feud with John Cena, but then was put with Chris Jericho and came out on top in that feud. It kind of, I don't know. It may sound it's purely coincidental, but it kind of makes you think: are they fed to John Cena to break them down, and then sent to work with Jericho to slowly build them back up, or what? But anyways, I digress. Well, folks, I think I'm gonna stop there for tonight. We will pick up on a future. We'll pick up on a later date. I do want to again thank you, the fans, for their support. Thank you to those who take time to listen to the episodes. It's greatly appreciated. Be sure to give a like and a subscribe. And folks, I will say this right now, just by the stuff that I've read, Vince McMahon, you heavily dropped the ball on Bray Wyatt. But anyways, we will continue on at a later date, and we'll talk. We'll get to talk about his solo run after the Wyatt family split up, and then hopefully we can get into when he became the Fiend, etc., etc. Excuse me. Again, folks, thank you again, and I should have this episode uploaded probably within the next hour or so. Again, if you would like to make a donation to Grizzly's Cave, or if you would be interested in sponsoring Grizzly's Cave, you can reach out to me at grizzliescave@yahoo.com. And again, if you have any stories that you'd like to share from any experiences that you've had when you were a fan at a show, or you got to go see a pay-per-view live in person, or if you met a wrestler, if you've been in the business, feel free to write to me at grizzliescave@yahoo.com. All right, folks, this is Grizzly Andrew signing off, saying take care and God bless.